Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SIG Network meeting for December 4th, 2025. As usual, this meeting abides by the CNCF Code of Conduct. So basically boils down to be nice to one another. And we will start off, looks like Dan has the agenda, but we'll start off with triage. So let me just share this one. There is only one issue in the triage.
So we looked at that briefly last time. It's a API server or API machinery bug, really, that is tagged as SIG Network because it's networking related, but I don't think it's really our issue to triage.
Yeah, it looks like it's like a boomerang. What do we want to do with this?
No. It's a routing problem. You know, the API server has this egress selector. Who has this keyboard? Sorry. Bowie, you are on mute.
Sorry, Makai, I just muted you. Yeah, go ahead, Anton.
Okay. No, the API server has this egress selector, and if I recall correctly, this person has a server with multiple NICs, and the API server is not using the right destination.
So I see. So this is like a configuration, like a user.
You can assign to me, and I close support or something. And
okay. Going back, so that's the only thing. We don't have anything else. Do we want to just briefly check the assigned? Oh, what's going on? Inconsistent behavior when switching between headless and cluster IP services. Interesting.
This is good. This is one of the team's favorite.
When attempting to modify a headless service, operation appears to succeed, but change does not actually take effect. Service remains headless. Interesting. Is this an actual issue? Looks like they can reproduce it.
No, the go down. Is this thing that when you apply a patch, they send empty cluster IP, and if I recall correctly, the empty cluster IP means I don't change it.
That's right. The empty cluster IP explicitly means bring forward the old cluster IP value. It's a very quiet patch.
There was a command that you can send, so I always forget this, is update, right? If you send an empty in an update, you modify so it follows the update. If you send empty, it's not going to be empty.
No, in service, we end up doing something stupid, shocking, where it used to be, you remember this issue, right? It was applying the service is not idempotent, right? And
yeah, that's
the problem was it would give them an error the second time they tried to do an update because they didn't specify cluster IP in the first place, and so they thought they could just repeat that and it would be okay, which totally is a reasonable thing to assume, but it wasn't okay because the API server interpreted it as trying to unset the cluster IP. So instead we said, well, if the type is the same, we'll just bring forward the cluster IP value like a tiny little surgical patch. Except if cluster IP is none, we'll bring forward the none too.
Well, I was trying.
Works as intended. Yikes.
I mean, we could. we could handle none as a special case, I guess, and not bring forward none. But like, yeeks.
You might end up breaking other people who replied on that. Just
Yeah, right. I mean, the problem is that we stored this in spec and not in status, right?
right.
Also, the problem is that something that didn't fail will start to fail.
Right. And anything we change now is at risk of breaking something else, right? It's kind of a spider web. I think the right answer is to say this is an unfortunate corner. Why don't you assign it to me?
All right. Okay, I'm going to move on to look at some of the other ones. Why is GitHub having issues? Okay. Contract. I'll just go through. There's only 2 more.
I think, yeah, we already have a PR for this one.
Okay. So this one is well on its way. Do we need to untriage it?
Yeah,
Sure.
you can accept.
Okay. I forget the command. I don't want to bounce it around. I'll do the triage accept. Is it dash accept? Can someone tell me?
No, triage space accept.
Okay. Kubeproxy Health Z should support IPv6 dual stack. Interesting.
Oh, I think this is an old one that got reopened, and I think it got assigned to me, and I haven't yet figured out what to say about the triage flag and if it needs an update. So I need to deal with this.
All right. It's assigned to Dan. I think we're good. It looks like we did everything. So let's move on to the agenda. Okay. So
if anyone who's not me has any agenda items, feel free to add them. But so as I was adding these agenda items, I'm noticing that it takes longer and longer for the agenda doc to load. It actually goes back just over 10 years now, I think, or almost, not quite 10 years. So maybe we should start a new agenda doc and just have a link back to this one. Does that make sense?
Don't be too radical, Dan.
Does it get any better if you do the tabs? Can you have like tabs per year or something?
I think that doesn't actually make it I don't know.
As I understand, doesn't matter how many tabs you have, there's just like a limit. It has to load the whole doc.
I think a doc per year or per decade is totally a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, I think there's, this is a doc that's set up in kind of, the original way, which is someone's personal account somewhere owns it and has shared it with the world. There are new, more, I guess, proven safe methods to share Kubernetes docs that some other SIGs are doing. I'd recommend just starting new and using that, and then pointing back to this one. So
I can take this one up. Rob, do you want to send me how to do?
Yeah, I've got some old reference somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, because I know I own some docs that are in that situation, and people have pinged me on it.
I believe this one is owned by Dan Williams, but I'm not totally sure about that. But yeah, so okay.
All right.
Bo, you're taking that?
Yep.
All right. So then the next one. This started with Antonio pointing out to me that we have an Ingress conformance test, which I had never realized before, and it turns out we do. And who knows how many other things we have in Kubernetes and Kubernetes SIGs that we're not really paying attention to, that somebody's going to dig up and think, oh, this is a fully supported SIG network project. I should make my production cluster depend on it. So it would be great if somebody could look through. I guess we've got more people here now. Rob, you're volunteering?
No. I mean, what I'll say is, I was involved in this back when it was kind of like conformance test when it was too late, right? We had an API that everyone had implemented, and we're like, okay, this is what it means to be conformant with it. And some people took notice, and others were just like, well, we already have what we have. And so, we tried. There are still a non-trivial number of implementations that use these tests and like pre-submits, maybe not pre-submits, but they run them regularly. So completely removing them would be disruptive. Adding a note saying these are no longer actively maintained, I don't know that the correct way. It's a frozen API, right? So we don't really
archiving the
expect
repo.
performance.
So like it stays there, it doesn't go away. It's just frozen.
So one thing is it still functional? Because it's like really old.
No,
So
I
if
believe
it's still
so.
functional, I guess it's okay.
I use them for the cloud provider Kai. So it's
the
ones that can run.
They're still functional, and there's actually a funny thing that gateway conformance tests have a strange dependency on ingress conformance tests, in that we use the same echo server. So that is very bizarre dependency, but it exists.
So I didn't necessarily want to discuss the ingress conformance tests in this meeting. That was just sort of what inspired this. The point being that there are probably 25 more repos that we could also be having this conversation about, and we have no idea what they are. So it seems like we ought to try and figure this out. And it seemed like maybe that could be a good project for somebody who wants to get involved and doesn't know what to do.
Should we file an issue in SIG? I don't know how to track this except in this doc somewhere.
Yeah, I guess if nobody's going to volunteer in the meeting, then we could file an issue for it.
What are we interested in doing with this? Is it like identifying repos that exist under Kubernetes or Kubernetes SIGs that should be within the scope of SIG Network?
I think maybe just having a survey to understand what is out there. just a list.
Yeah, like stuff that is already theoretically under the scope of SIG Network that we have just forgotten about.
I probably will miss things that are 5 years old or more, but I can definitely help with some of the stuff that is within the past 5 years.
Dan, is it just possible to just look at the repo? It should say SIG Network, right? Like, or is that not obvious?
So it occurred to me that it's possible that every repo in Kubernetes and Kubernetes SIGs is linked to from like the org repo or something, because we have centralized permissions on all of our repos, right? So we might be able to find a list of all of them there, which might even explicitly say which ones allegedly belong to us. But yeah, I don't really know.
I think Mike can maybe just take a stab. It might be you can just find it.
Talk with or Benjamin Elder or Christoph Brecker that they know all these GitHub things and files. I don't know if it's in Kubernetes or on Kubernetes community, or one of these has this structure with the GitHub teams, SIGs, and all this stuff. I need to find it.
Okay. So the next item, I had all these notes written and I was trying to sort of get them out of my head and into better places. So I filed 3 issues in the enhancements repo for things that we have talked about doing KEPs about, but nobody's working on. And then since I added these to the agenda doc like 3 or 4 days ago, 2 of them now have assignees, and the other one does not have an assignee, but has somebody who's asking lots of questions and proposing ideas. So these may already all be taken now, but if anyone else is interested and wants to pay attention in case the other people don't pick them up, you can CC yourselves on those potential KEPs. So these are all ideas for KEPs that would need to be figured out and then written and then implemented.
Dan, do you want to just go through real quick, like each one, just to give a summary?
So the first one is we had talked on an issue that got pulled up for triage a few weeks ago about how we should probably deprecate external IPs. And there was some discussion in the Kubernetes issue about what we should do, and I linked to that from the KEP issue. So this is mostly, there's some documentation and adding annotations and stuff like that, but it's mostly getting rid of stuff. And Adrian assigned that to himself. So the second one comes out of the network policy API. With cluster network policy, people want to do these things like saying, oh, nobody's allowed to talk to things outside of the cluster, but then you don't want that policy to match, say, the cloud provider that needs to be talking to the cloud API, which is outside the cluster. So there's this idea that you want to be able to specify that a policy only applies to user namespaces, not system namespaces. And currently there's no portable way to do that. So we thought, oh, we should add a portable way to do that. And there's a Googler who has been commenting on this and asking questions and talking about it. So I think this is effectively claimed at this point.
I want to be on record that I still don't love this idea.
You should comment on that then.
Not that the problem isn't a real problem, but the meaning of system is way too vague.
You should add comments then so that we don't come up with a bad solution.
Yeah, I had a comment to similar effect, but anyways, we can discuss on the issue. There's clearly like a lot of comments on there.
And then the third one is something that came out of the discussions around the designing kubelet probes KEP. We've kind of had this idea that we probably want to make kubelet probes just go directly into the pod network namespace rather than traveling over the network, so that we don't need to add a special network policy exemption for kubelet probes. But the problem with that is that then it means that the probe can succeed before the pod has actually been attached to the network by the pod network implementation. And so the idea was that we could fix that by encouraging pod network implementations to use pod readiness gates to indicate when they have finished attaching a pod to the network. So the general idea is all there. It needs someone to write it up and then track if people are actually implementing it so that we can depend on it. And it looks like Surya has claimed that one. So,
okay, so Surya is going to work on this. Assuming.
But she's always busy, so if someone else wants, you should comment. Yeah, so those are the three KEPs that I've opened ideas for. And then the last bullet point, last agenda item. So we've done some updates to Ingress docs. Of course, Ingress Nginx is now officially announced that it's going away. It's retired. We want to make sure that the docs reflect that correctly, that we're not encouraging people to use Ingress Nginx anymore. And then more generically, it's not totally clear in the docs what the situation between Ingress and Gateway is, and it could be a lot better. And so it would be good if somebody could go through and make sure that, one, we're being consistent about what we're saying, and two, that thing that we're being consistent about is actually the right thing.
Yeah, I noticed that there was some activity to sort of make sure that Ingress Nginx was not referenced, but not clear how complete that is, because I know it is referenced in many, many places.
It's actually not referenced in that many places because we don't have that much discussion of Ingress, but it was mentioned pretty much everywhere we mention Ingress. But I think a lot of that is gone now between Rob's PR and the other one that I did.
Yeah, and Ricardo did another follow-up that got some more references out. So thank you, Dan and Ricardo, for actually getting PRs in.
So Dan, I have a question about the gateway recommendation, and maybe Rob, there's a question to you, what do you think is needed for this? The Ingress Nginx removal is that that's pretty clear what to do, but like this other stuff is less clear.
Yeah, I mean this is on me. I'm trying to find time to get back to it. But you know, Ricardo and I are also working on a blog post about this general topic as well. Hopefully, we can reuse some of the same content there for this. But yeah, I mean, the overarching theme is that Gateway is recommended and has many more features than the Ingress API, but does not offer full feature parity with the full set of Ingress Nginx annotations and never will. So yeah,
the thing I put as TLS blah blah, I remember people asking at the end of the Ingress Nginx talk about, oh, how do I do this thing with, I forget exactly what TLS thing, and people were saying, oh, there's an alpha or experimental gateway API, but I couldn't remember any of the details. And
yeah, so with a lot of Ingress controllers, including Ingress Nginx, they just merged a whole bunch of ingresses together, and every ingress resource could specify different TLS configurations. So you could effectively have a whole bunch of different TLS certs for different ingresses, all combined. On Gateway API, we have a limit of 64 listeners on a gateway. In practice, that means you can have 63 different host names with different TLS certs. And then one, you know, assuming you're going to do an 80 to 443 redirect, you need that as well for one of the 64 slots. And that limit has been frustrating to some who had more than 63, basically, listeners or equivalent. And so coming in February is the GA of listener set, or the planned GA of listener set, that will allow people to have all the listeners in the world that they could ever dream of. So that would address that one. But my hunch is that the set of, you know, it's I'm hoping it's a relatively small set of Ingress Nginx users that need more than 64 distinct. You know, obviously it's a real thing, but I hope that it's not like 90% of Ingress Nginx users need listener set.
Okay, yeah. You know, I only caught bits and pieces of it, and it sounded like it was a more serious problem than that. But yeah, this sounds pretty not big.
Okay. Rob, is this one on you, or is this you're looking for help?
I mean,
here?
if anyone wants to volunteer to help out, I will gladly appreciate support. You know, the thing I keep on telling myself is over the holidays, things will calm down and I'll find time for changes like this. We'll see if that ends up being true. But it is very much something I want to get fixed.
Okay, so if you want to help out, reach out to Rob, I guess. And then we are at the end of our agenda. So if anyone else has any open items.
Can we go to the systems discussion? Namespace system discussion? I really think that is interesting.
Okay, I'm opening this.
Although Tim is gone now, so.
One thing is there is a lot, like, I highly recommend reading all the comments to be able to catch up.
But I didn't read it, so that's what is the TL? What is the proposal to have a special namespaces?
The idea is that in general, administrators want to be able to create policies that apply to all user namespaces, and they want to not worry that that's accidentally going to break some part of the cluster. And so the idea was that we would have some label that lets you do that will let you select all end user namespaces and not select anything that isn't an end user namespace. And part of the question here is whether that is just system versus user, or if system needs to be broken up into more categories than that. And I'm not sure exactly what Tim's argument was.
Well, the question is, how do you know that something is system and something is not system? The
Yeah,
people
that
that
was
use
my comment was like, there is this option structure API server. Like, is that the definition, or it's somewhere else? But like, where would that somewhere else be? Because there is this. If you look at this options.go, there's like a very explicit, like, here's a list.
Right, but
Yeah, like
I mean,
right
I'm thinking more in terms of, like, that is definitely not the exhaustive list for all cluster types. That may happen to be the standard list, but you know, the idea is that something like, say, core DNS is often run inside the cluster, but is clearly not an end user workload, right? So
you want to put everything that is, let's say, infra or something required for run the cluster into some special namespace?
don't want to put it into a special namespace. I want to mark the namespace that it is already in as being special.
Oh.
So,
And who does that? Because the problem is, so set manager, for example, or turn of the gateway implementation, that's going to be an infra system component, right?
mm-hmm.
So they need to opt in. Who is going to modify that?
That's something the CAP needs to figure out. Nadia?
Okay. I thought that was.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we just want to come up with label names, or should that also include someone actually applying these labels and having some contracts around that?
So there's actually a discussion. There's like a big block of text. There's like the how, but then there's also just like the higher level, like, what does it mean kind of thing.
We definitely need to agree on the what, assuming that the CAP is even going to happen. The how probably needs some agreement. But
yeah, so there's some like recommendations here.
Right. And then, okay, so Mike is just saying in chat about how, you know, yeah, there may be weird edge cases, and we need to think about, if there's an edge case, do we want, you know, and it's going to be mistaken for a user workload or mistaken for not a user workload, which is better.
So I think last time we discussed that the conclusion was that having just the label without having a way to be sure that the right namespaces are labeled with the right system or non-system label doesn't add much value. And then enforcing that all actual system namespaces are labeled with that is pretty much impossible, or at least downstream specific, because everyone deploys their stuff. And then if that's the case, that's not much different from every platform just defining their own label.
So one of the things I talked about in the discussion here is that, you know, think about like official documentation. You want to be able to provide an example network policy of, how do I make this network policy that does this? And in that case, you want to just be able to say, you know, have it not select these namespaces, and then you're good. And, you know, maybe that won't work in some clusters, but that would be that cluster's faults, I guess.
Okay, so then this CAP should be talking about both the label and that it has to be actually enforced and applied on some namespaces, and then you go try to define what is system in these recommendations, because you kind of say, okay, every good cluster should apply system label on the system namespaces, but we don't know what system namespaces are, so good luck with that.
Yeah, and you know, maybe I'm not exactly sure about Tim's objection, but maybe we'll decide, oh yeah, you can't actually define this in a way that make sense everywhere. And then we would just have to give up on the idea. I feel like we can though.
I have to drop, by the way, so I had to close the screen share. But if folks want to use the time, then go ahead.
You should make someone else host.
I think that we are at the end of the agenda, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I guess we could sort of keep talking about this, but probably people should read that and discuss there, I guess.
Okay, then I think we can close and sort of follow up on that issue thread.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks.